Hello everyone and welcome to the Proudfoot podcast. Today on our 21st episode, we are going to talk about targeting in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So let's get started. So when it comes to D&D, there are two ways that we target. We are either going to target a creature with a spell or with an attack. So that's kind of the same thing. Spell attacks are the things that we target with, but sometimes we're going to target with spells that aren't going to actually deal damage, but just have an effect, as we've been discussing in the last few episodes. Then when it comes to weapons, the targeting becomes a lot more obvious. Usually you're either targeting a creature with a ranged attack or a melee attack. Melee attack's pretty straightforward, but there are examples of melee attacks that creatures make that are not magical that have these targeting rules. So we're going to talk about all of that today. So the first thing I want to start off with is cover when it comes to targeting, because if you're targeting someone, it's good to know how cover will affect them. Well, in D&D, there are three types of cover. There's half cover, 3/4 cover, and total cover. And ultimately, the kind of cover a creature has is up to the DM. And depending on how your DM has laid out combat, if it's theater of the mind, where there isn't a board set up and the DM has just told you where everyone is, then you really have to take their word for it. In the other example, you really get to have a full visual, but even so, sometimes if you have miniatures on the table, your DM might not have stuff to represent walls and cover and stuff, so you might still have to use a little bit of your imagination here and there. The short of that is talk to your DM, ask what sort of cover the enemy has, and sometimes DMs won't tell you. I am on the side that DMs should tell you what kind of cover someone has, because that's sort of obvious. If you're fighting someone, you should be able to see what sort of cover they have. So technically speaking, half cover gives you a +2 bonus to your AC and to any dex saving throws you make. 3/4 cover gives you a +5 to your AC and your dex save, and then total cover basically means that you can't be targeted by an attack or a spell directly. So you're completely covered with total cover. So that's it. You either get +2, +5, or you can't be targeted. Cover is pretty straightforward. Now, what we want to move on to is the different ways that we target. So when it comes to spells and certain abilities, there are three types of ways that attacks go. So with a shot from a bow or a crossbow or even a thrown weapon like a dagger or an axe, a throwing axe rather, it's pretty straightforward. You're just going to hit one target. But with spells, there are different modes of targeting. So things come in different shapes, basically. We have line targeting, cone targeting, cube targeting, sphere targeting, and cylinder targeting. Now, there's a nice diagram on page 204 in the spellcasting rules that shows you the point of origin for all of these targeting. So basically, you can kind of imagine for a lot of them what makes sense, but for a line, it's one end of the line being you, the point of origin, and then it goes straight off in that direction because it's a line. Cone, you're at the apex of the cone, so right, the pointy bit, right? If you're thinking of an ice cream cone, that part at the bottom, the very pointy part, that's the point of origin. A cube, it's any one of the center of the faces of a cube. So a cube has 6 faces, pick the center point of any one of those squares, that is the point of origin. A sphere, it's basically the center of the sphere. And with a cylinder, it is the bottom center of one of the circles of the cylinder. So you can, again, consult the diagram rather than just listen to me explain that. And then if you also are on that page, you'll see that each one of these shapes gets its own little treatment. And it basically is just going to describe how you get to set this up. So with a lot of these spells, sometimes for the spheres especially, you get to choose a point of origin. So it doesn't have to originate from you. The spell will specify. Like, there's one spell where, I can't remember the name of it exactly off the top of my head, but you shoot out a bolt of lightning that goes 100 feet long and is 5 feet wide. So basically it kicks everyone in a straight line in those 5 feet squares in front of you and hits all those people. Then with the spheres, you can target some random spot and try and get this big area of effect. So that comes back to the area of effect stuff we were talking about in previous episodes. So a sphere would usually be area of effect. But speaking of things that use this that aren't spells, Dragonborns have a ability that is a breath attack where they get to breathe fire, breathe acid, breathe lightning, whatever kind of breath they choose to have. It's a choice for Dragonborns. You can check that out in their race description on the relevant page. I don't have it pulled up in front of me. And that operates as a cone, and it's a 15-foot cone. So cones are interesting because when it goes out from the point of origin, it basically covers one 5-foot square, then covers the next 2 5-foot squares next to that, and then 3. So you can kind of imagine like this step pyramid that it would make and target all the people in there. Okay, so that has been the short explanation of targeting and cover in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Proudfoot podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or Twitter. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.